This is Daniel Simon at Baton Rouge Community College. This week I'll have a preview video for History 1123 summer semester. Anyway, I want to welcome you, of course, to my course at BRCC. Some of you probably have already seen some of my videos out there I've got about the class. This particular video goes into a lot of the details into Canvas modules, which you'll, of course, follow throughout the summer semester to complete the course. And I'm going to go ahead and, of course, bring up what Canvas looks like. Some of you probably already looked at my Canvas already at this point. But if you go to Canvas modules, you'll see at the top, I do have kind of some questions about the course that you can ask right there. This goes into basically some of the background information about the course, including the syllabus, etc. And yeah, the first one there, let me know if you have a question about the course. There is a Canvas discussion section. If you have any kind of questions about the course during the semester, of course, you can also email me as well about the course in general, which some of you have already kind of answered some emails already at this point early on in the semester. So I do have that at the top in modules. If you go down, you'll notice the main section there in Canvas. Welcome to History 1123. There is an announcement, of course, about the course, kind of like the background of it. It does talk about some assignments in it right now that I've got. And it does include a major preview video that I did create, or I think it was early in the year, I think it was originally. I think that's a new one I did for my class at BRCC in the spring. That kind of gives you a tour of like the whole, Canvas itself, and probably talks about different assignments that are in there. And the syllabus is, of course, right here and located in different other locations, of course, throughout pretty much the Canvas. You'll see it under syllabus, and then it's located in various announcements throughout the Canvas course itself. Here you'll notice that pre-test, there is this pre-test that I do usually give out at the beginning of the semester. You need to complete that in week 1. There should be an announcement about it, and the assignment's right here. That assignment, of course, is due Friday, June 6th. Just ask you basic questions, historical questions, kind of trying to find out what you know about history in general. I think there's a couple questions in there about the syllabus as well. So, do make sure to, look over the syllabus as well. You also got the contract policy page, which you'll get bonus for as well. Probably like 10 bonus points, I think, at the most. I think it says 5, but I'll give you probably 10 for that. And that's also due the same date as the pre-test. So both are due Friday, June 6th at noon. So, make sure you, look at that as well. So there should be like a preview, about the course out there that I've already posted in Canvas announcements that you probably already seen at this point about the course. Now, I do have some other links here that are important in my Canvas modules. You'll see them in also Canvas announcements as well, but I do have important links about my YouTube channel, because I do use pretty much my YouTube channel to put up videos, pretty much for a lot of our assessments that we have for the course. And there's my main YouTube channel, which is right here. I've also got links for a lot of our lectures throughout the semester, History 1123 lectures that we'll be, of course, be using. And you can comment, of course, ask questions about those videos, not just in Canvas discussions, but also in the videos themselves. So the video on YouTube, you can put the comments, questions there. I think actually I give you bonus points for that if you do both. So if you post the comment question in Canvas discussions and on YouTube, you'll get double the points overall. There is like an audio lectures I've been kind of working on, also kind of like little podcasts of the same lectures. They don't really have any PowerPoints with that, but you want to listen to like audio versions of the lecture, you can do that, or pretty much watch both. There's also, for this class, I've got this bonus project that I do for History 1123. It's the BRCC Veterans World History Project. If you're interested in that, let me know. I'll talk about it more further down in modules, but it's also in Canvas assignments. You've probably already seen it maybe, but there's a link there for past students that have done it, like have done that project. It's not something that's done a lot every semester, but I usually have a few that do it throughout the semester. It's worth up to 200 bonus points. It can replace other assignments, I think like the book report, I believe, but that's something you might want to look into. Now I'm working on this preview video right here. I'm going to put it right here where it says preview video for History 1123 summer semester. That's for the Canvas modules for the whole semester that I'll have. So I'll post it right here. I will, however, send you links throughout the semester for each week. So probably week 1 coming up, I'll send you the direct link for, I guess, where week 1 starts, more or less, week 2, week 3, and so on. Now I'm on. Usually I make multiple videos, but I think I'm just going to make one major video that we can pretty much use throughout the semester. So let's start with week 1 modules. These are various assignments, announcements, assessments that are going to be upcoming throughout the semester. Now, week 1 is going to entail 2 different historical topics. The first one that you'll have week 1, which will start on Monday, June 2nd, by the way, will be on exploration, world exploration or European exploration. Some people call it the Age of Discovery. That's going to be a major component that'll be, beginning at the semester, where it goes into how Europeans begin to explore like the New World, Old World, talk about Portuguese exploration, get into like Christopher Columbus, talk about other explorers like Ferdinand Magellan, and so on. So I know the part 1 lecture goes into like the background of it, Portuguese exploration, and goes up to like the time of Christopher Columbus, Amerigo Vespucci, etc. There's a part 2 lecture which goes into detail about Ferdinand Magellan's expedition, the one that went around the world, and does talk about other explorers, mostly in the New World, up to like around the 18th century. I do kind of talk about the Pacific exploration a little bit as well. There's a combined version of that lecture that I have out there. I've also got an audio version as well, like I was talking about before. So there's different ones out there that I do use. That's the PowerPoint that I use for that particular lecture. Like I said, that's going to be assessed in a Canvas quiz. Canvas quiz number 1, which I'll announce later. And of course, there's the discussion section. So if you have a comment about it, you got a question about the lectures, you'll post it there in Canvas discussions, and then also on the video in YouTube. So you get, double points. I think it's +4 for the comment question in Canvas discussions, and then +4 if you do it also repeat, just copy it, cut and paste or whatever into YouTube. So there's the announcement about it. And of course, that assignment about, that Canvas quiz on exploration is going to be due, you can see, Friday, June 13th. So I do have a deal where after the due date ends, I could extend it, but usually I just leave it open till the end of the semester. And I usually take points off per day it's late. So they kind of remain open throughout the semester, a lot of assignments. But I take off points after the due date ends. Now, still in week 1, we move on to like what we call the Conquest of America. That's when the conquistadors kind of invade into the New World after Columbus. So they come in. You may have heard of Hernan Cortez, Pizarro. Those are kind of famous conquistadors, are kind of well known. So this starts on the same date for that one. So this particular assessment of lectures is going to be on really a couple lectures that I've got on that. I've got really 2 lectures that I've made before. Part 1, that goes into the background of the conquistadors, like, El Dorado, probably was kind of an influence, like the search for gold, the gold cities, things like that. goes into some of the early conquistadors, like Juan Ponce de Leon, etc. Hernando de Soto, you may have heard of him. Hernan Cortez, also the most famous one, probably out of the conquistadors. Part two kind of continues with the conquistadors. That goes more into like South America. You got Francisco Pizarro, who goes into Peru, conquers the Incan Empire, go into some Spanish colonization too. They start colonizing the Americas, things like that. I do have an audio version of that. I don't know if I have a combined version of that one. Might have it out there somewhere, but I do have an audio version too, which is right there as well. So that's the PowerPoints, of course, for it. Like I said, it'll be assessed on another Canvas quiz number 2 as well. And by the way, these Canvas quizzes, a lot of the assessment questions, multiple choice matching and things like that, usually run into some fill in the blank. Sometimes I do have short answer, but most of the questions come off the lectures and also the study guides, which I'll talk about study guides down below. Make sure you try to use those study guides to help prepare for a lot of assessments. There's the comment section, of course, and discussions, which also has the videos links in it too, like all the different discussion sections right there. So there's the announcement about that part 2, Canvas quiz number 2, we have to do as well, which will be due the same date as the Canvas quiz number 1. So Friday, June 13th, you see. All right, moving down. Now we're moving into week 2 of course, the summer semester. And we've got week 2 lecture schedule you're looking at right there. Now from there, I move on in week 2, Monday, June 9th. I go next into the Reformation, the Protestant Reformation you probably heard about before. You may have heard of Martin Luther, John Calvin, and all these other famous Christian reformers that come about close to about the 16th century. So this is a series of lectures that kind of go into that period. So there's an announcement about that one, which will be, by the way, be assessed on another Canvas quiz number 3. So the part 1 lecture, that one is about the background of the Reformation, how it got started, mostly in Europe, like especially like in Germany, and talk a lot about Martin Luther at first. His famous 95 Theses, probably heard of that. John Calvin, who develops, Calvinism. Do talk about the English Reformation, Radical Reformation, and then also get into like the Catholic revival or Reformation that they have. Protestants call it the Counter-Reformation as well. That goes, of course, into part 2 as well. Go into like a lot of things like the religious wars that kind of were spawned by the Reformation. You see this in France with their religious wars. I see witch hunts throughout Europe that begin. And do kind of go up to like the time of the 30 Years' War, which was the peak of the Reformation overall. So there's like an audio version of that lecture you can see right there also. So Canvas quiz number 3, of course, will be assessed there. And that's, of course, the discussion section you're looking at right there. So yeah, that'll be assessed. You can see there's the announcement. And of course, that particular, quiz number 3 on the Reformation, that'll be due later into June. So Friday, June 20th is the due date that you're looking at right there. Now keep going down into modules. So you're still in week 2. I go next into the age of absolutism, where Monday, June 9th, of course, you can see still, we go into the different modernized national states that start rising in early modern times. You get the European state system that kind of starts to take off. And I first talk about Bourbon, the Bourbon France, like Bourbon dynasty that's in France. It's kind of well known. You've probably heard about. There should be an announcement about the different lectures that are going to be assessed here in week 2. And I talk about the Bourbon dynasty. King Louis XIV was the most famous monarch of the Bourbon dynasty. House of Bourbon. There was a bunch of Bourbon dynasties in Europe, like Spain and other countries. And So I go into that period. There's a audio podcast of that too if you want. Then I go into the Habsburgs. Habsburgs was a very famous dynasty throughout Europe, which controlled multiple countries, especially Spain and Austria. And so talk about the Habsburg empires that are well known. Like Emperor Charles V was probably the most famous Habsburg in Spain. You may have heard of Emperor Charles V. Not Charles V, Charles VI, who was a famous ruler. Emperor Leopold I, I think, was another one. Maria Theresa, that was a famous ruler, of course, only female ruler, of course, of the Austrian Habsburg Empire that they had. That's the PowerPoint course for these lectures, by the way, for all of them. And that is the discussion section also for, at least for those part 1 and 2 lectures. I kind of separate those for those two. Then there's a part 3 on the age of absolutism. I go in the rise of Prussia. You have the Kingdom of Prussia, which becomes well known in early modern times, especially by the 18th, 19th century. And a lot of that was because of Frederick the Great, one of their greatest monarchs that they had. And he created the Prussian state that would eventually lead into what we call Germany. Of course, the German Empire kind of sets the stage for that in the future. There's an audio podcast for that too. And I do go into also the rise of the Russian state as well, Russian absolutism, talk about all the czars of Russia, Romanov dynasty, Peter the Great, Catherine the Great, and so on. But I do kind of go back a little bit to like medieval Russia, like all the way back to the Rurik dynasty too, as well. So there's another podcast about that one that's audio as well. So for parts 3 and 4 lectures on Prussia and Russia, there's a second section discussion period, of course, there you see it right there. Now, one thing that's important about the age of absolutism, that period, I will be assessing that starting in week 2. And I've got Canvas quiz number 3 with the Reformation, but when they've pretty much given that out, of course, together with that. So that'll be assessed on the first exam quiz. So that's right here, which that'll be due, you can see, Monday, June 23rd. I might extend those exams possibly, so a few days, but after the due date expires, whenever that is, late points will be taken off after. So I do include kind of a review study guides for that are kind of there on the bottom, you can see, but they're actually in the main study guides. I'll show you below that are also in a Canvas assignments. Now moving on to week 3 of the semester, I move on to the age really of scientific revolution and age of enlightenment, which kind of comes right after right on the heels of the age of absolutism that we have. So starting on Monday, June 16th, you can see we'll be starting that particular topic. So yeah, there it is right there. Canvas announcement about that. And that'll be assessed in a first exam bonus quiz, which will be for extra credit. I think it's 30 bonus points. Usually I give some of these out for major exams. And that will be assessed on really 2 historical topics. You got the scientific revolution, which really took off because of guys like Copernicus, Galileo. You may have heard of scientists like that. They were also astronomers and mathematicians and so on. Kepler is another one you probably have heard of. So got that. Sir Isaac Newton, of course, we'll talk about him too. And then we do have the Age of Enlightenment that kind of comes after that in Europe. Probably heard of Voltaire, Denis Diderot, Rousseau. Those are all famous figures that were part of the Age of Enlightenment that were big. So I do have a lecture on that. I think I've got several lectures I've got on that topic on my YouTube channel, but it's one of them, I guess, that you can look at, which right there for that assessment. So yeah, there's comment questions, you can ask right there with that on Canvas and in YouTube as well. But there's the assessment for you to complete. So Monday, June 30th is the due date for that. Usually for bonus assignments, I don't extend them. So not even for late points. So if it closes, it closes. So if you don't get the extra credit points, well, it's tough on you. So um, I give out a lot of bonus, and so if you don't take advantage of it, you're a fool for it. So week 3, um, we've got of course, continuing Monday, June 16th as well. I continue with the rise of the British Empire, which mostly talks about England, history of England, or early modern England anyway, with its history. So I kind of got 2 main lectures that I have on that particular period. This will be assessed in another Canvas quiz number 4, starting in that week 3. And the part 1 lecture, which you see right here, that mostly goes into Tudor England, like the House of Tudor, which you've heard about, King Henry VIII, Queen Elizabeth I. That's really the dynasty that kind of makes England what it is later, and starts becoming this modernized state that's eventually going to become an empire afterwards. Especially when the Stuarts come in, Stuart dynasty that takes over from Scotland. So I do have another audio type podcast if you want to look at that one too, as well. And then the part 2, that one goes into like the Stuart period. After Queen Elizabeth dies, you get King James the First that comes in takes over from Scotland. And so the Stuarts start taking over, and they're the ones that really kind of make it into an empire, really, because they start colonizing all over the world, like in the Americas, Atlantic, the Caribbean, and other places in the world, India, etc. So I do kind of go into some of the later dynasties that they have up to like now, like the Windsor dynasty that we have. There's an audio podcast of that one too, if you want. So there you go, Canvas quiz number 4, of course, for week 3. And that's the discussion section. So if you have any comments, questions about that, do let me know. And then there's the quiz right there, number 4. And I do have a due date of Friday, June 27th. So everything is staggered throughout the semester as we go along throughout the summer semester. Now, going into week 4, so we're getting close to the middle of the semester here. I move on to, of course, talk about the French Revolution, the age of Napoleon. And so you get this case where in France they have a series of revolutions that topple, these absolute monarchs like Louis XVI. I'll get to that. So you have that, and you have drastic changes, reforms throughout the country. So that's primarily what that first lecture. And it does go into like a reign of terror. They go crazy and start killing people, stuff like that. Guillotine being used. So I do have a podcast on that. It's audio version too. And then I get into like Napoleon. Napoleon comes in, who's this French general from Corsica, and he takes over the country and starts his own age because influences Europe and conquers Europe. He's famous for his Napoleonic Code, etc. So he kind of has his influence on Europe for about 15 years or more. So that's pretty much what's going to be for week 4 that you're looking at right there. So there's an audio version of that one right there. And this one is going to be, these lectures right here on the French Revolution and the Age of Napoleon will be assessed on the second exam quiz. So there won't be like a separate quiz for that one if you're wondering how that's going to be assessed. So continuing into week 4, I then continue into like the 19th century, which I kind of start talking about that with, Napoleon and like the Napoleonic Wars. It's like one of the first major events, I guess, they have in the 19th century, which is a pretty bloody event. Several million people killed. But I then go into like 19th century. I talk about like the post-Napoleon period of Europe after Napoleon is exiled. He's exiled to Elba, then St. Helena, and they get European powers get rid of him. And we do have like the Industrial Revolution that follows, where you get countries like Britain and others that start modernizing throughout the world. Also, you get the rise of Russia. Russia's empire becomes powerful in the 19th century. France, their empire comes back, especially under Emperor Napoleon III, who was a nephew of Napoleon. So that's kind of what those two lectures are mostly about. Part one's more about Russia and France, I think, after the war, which are kind of an odd couple, there. They even fight each other again in the Crimean War. I did talk about the rise of socialism too, like Karl Marx and so on as well, which kind of starts in the mid part of the 19th century. There's an audio podcast of both those that you're looking at right there. So for week 4, there are discussion section on those right there. All right, then for week 4, still in the same week, believe it or not, Monday, June 23rd, I then have, of course, the second exam. I pretty much post the exams week 2, 4, and 6 throughout the semester. So week 4, of course, second exam, which you see those are the topics on the second exam: French Revolution, Age of Napoleon, the 19th century, especially that part 1 and 2, along with Napoleon, will be pretty much on that particular assessment right there. So that one is going to be due on Monday, July the 7th, right there. I do have study guide sections that are kind of put in there. I don't know why I didn't put the first exam on there for some reason, but I'll show you those later. But those are right there. That one might be one of the harder assessments, maybe over the first one, because first exams it's got Age of Absolutism in it, but this one's got like kind of like almost like 4 different topics in it that we got. So yeah, they do have review questions for those you can see right there for that. But like I said, if you have a question about, those lectures, do let me know, or just, leave a comment, etc. All right, now moving to week 5, you see here, we go into like still, on the 19th century. I do have I got a new bonus quiz I've got here as well. I'll give you, which is on the Franco-Prussian War, which is kind of a major event, by the way, in the late 19th century. It ends up making really the German state, because you get German Empire afterwards it forms. So I do have like a bonus video quiz. I've got a few of these I'll probably have throughout the semester, but I've got this one, which is on the Franco-Prussian War, which is worth bonus points right there. I'll announce that later in week 5. But that's an assessment you can start working on. I think it's like Monday, June 30th is when it is for that one. For some reason, I left the quiz out for some reason. I'll put in there later, but that'll be due it'll be due in early July. More importantly, though, for week 5, I've got another 19th century lecture that's going to be kind of important towards the semester. That'll be on like another Canvas quiz number 5, but that one goes more into like famous movements that were in the 19th century, like the rise of nationalism. You get a lot of these nation states that form in especially Europe at that time, especially Germany and Italy. Like the unification of Germany was a major event in the 1800s. It totally changed everything worldwide. It led to like World War I, World War II. So nationalism is a major topic, that really influenced a lot of these world wars later. Even World War II, influenced it for sure. Rise of imperialism too. You get a lot of cases where a lot of modern states start creating like imperial colonies throughout the world. Africa, Europe, outside of Europe, really, Asia, Pacific, and so on. The United States even became an imperial power as well. So yeah, there's of course the actual lecture right there. I don't have a podcast, so I'm kind of working on that right now, but I'll probably maybe have one later, hopefully get one out to you. But that's pretty much those lectures right there. That's going to be assessed with, and there's, by the way, the discussion section for that one right there, like for the 19th century part 3 right there. But continuing in week 5, I do have another series of lectures which are on World War One, the Great War, as it's called, Monday, June 30th. I've got part one and part two. This is, of course, a major, event that changes history. I think World War One was the event that really changed the whole world. And I think if Gavrilo Princip wouldn't have shot the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, things may have been different. I think Adolf Hitler and the Nazis probably wouldn't have existed or anything, and maybe neither communism, things like that. But that's the announcement about it. Of course, like I said, it will be assessed with that part three lecture on nationalism and imperialism. The part one lecture on World War One, that one goes into like the background of World War One, of the Great War, the causes of it, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. It does kind of go into the early stages of World War One as well. Second one goes into like the Russian Revolution, which leads to the Soviet Union forming. Go to the end of the war, where Germany loses the war. And I do, of course, talk about the Treaty of Versailles, which, of course, the Allies create 1919. Some people think that was, of course, the other cause of World War II. But that's pretty much the topics that will be assessed with that Canvas quiz number 5 you're looking at. So there's the announcements about it you're looking at. So Friday, July 18th is the due date. So we're getting closer to the end of the semester with that. So there's the discussion section. Of course, you're looking at on the bottom. So let me keep moving on down here. Now we go into week 6 as well. Week 6, of course, can be started on Monday, July 7th. This one goes into the rise of fascism between world wars. And of course, you get the rise of Benito Mussolini in Italy. You get Adolf Hitler in Germany. Spain goes sort of fascist as well. The Japanese go fascist. So fascism is a thing that kind of changes the world war and leads to pretty much World War II breaking out. So it's kind of a major influence, obviously, along with also the rise of pretty much nationalist ideas that become kind of extreme at the time. So there's the announcement about looking at that, of course, that particular war. And that's going to be assessed on the final exam, which I'll have, of course, in week 6, same week. And watch the rise of fascism, of course, right there, that lecture right there, you can see. But yeah, if you got a comment question about that too, as well, there's the section, of course, right there for it. And say what I'm doing with that, I'm going to take the rise of fascism lecture and combine it with World War II. Now, that'll be pretty much the last assessment we'll have, of course, for the major one anyway, for the semester. Monday, July 7th, of course, I'll post those as well for week 6. Got a 2-part lecture series on the Second World War II. Number 2, of course, we got World War II, part 1 lecture, and then, of course, the other one, part 2 as well right here. And part 1 lecture, that one goes into like the outbreak of the war, especially in Europe. You get, Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler invading Poland. That's, of course, a major event that, of course, happens. You get also the deal where Nazi Germany overruns Europe, blitzkrieg, takes France and most of the Western countries. Then we get, the Nazis. They then go further. They invade the Soviet Union. So we get that too. And then, of course, Pearl Harbor. So that first lecture goes up to how, the United States gets in the war when the Japanese, the Empire of Japan, attacks the United States in Hawaii. Part 2, World War II, that goes more into like the end of the war. So it kind of talks about how the Allies start winning the war in 1942. You get a lot of battles where the Allies win, like El Alamein, Stalingrad, Battle of Midway, etc. Do kind of get up to like the United States fighting Japan in the Pacific, talk about the Manhattan Project, how that kind of helps to end the war with Japan, and so on. So there's a lecture for that one too as well. I did kind of put study guides in there too for just the different topics that, of course, are going to be on that particular assessment later down the line. So, yeah, that's the announcement, of course, about the final exam. You can see here it is due Friday, July 25th at midnight. There's also a discussion section, which is right here as well. There is a case where you can be exempt from the final. So if you do have a high percentage in the class, usually 96% or higher, you can, be exempt from taking the final. Although really, a lot of times if you have a high percentage, it doesn't hurt to take it. So, I mean, maybe just take it once or something like that. I think usually allow you up to 2 attempts or something like that, but it's usually not that bad of an exam, the final. But you do have to turn in remaining assignments. So second exam, make sure you complete that. Canvas was number 5. You do have to turn in your vocabulary assignments and so on. And then, of course, the book report. That's you have to have a research paper you have to turn in, of course, as well. I do have one more week in the semester. I kind of have, usually it's week 7, which that goes into like major events, like historical topics about the Cold War era, which follows World War II after the Allies defeat Nazi Germany, fascist Italy, and Japan. So usually assess these in kind of a bonus thing at the end of the semester. I have another bonus quiz. These have 2 bonus quizzes, one for the first exam and then one for the final that I do. And this one is worth up to 60 bonus points. So might want to take advantage of that and complete that particular assessment. And I think there's different lectures. There's a combined version of the lecture. These might be a little older lectures that I've got, but I know the first lecture starts like after World War II. Got to go into how the Cold War begins, the 1940s. That goes up through the Cuban Missile Crisis, which some people think that was the peak of the Cold War era. And then, of course, the part 2 lecture goes into like, I kind of talk about the Vietnam era. It's kind of more American history, that kind of thing. That was a major event that was in the Cold War era, one of the biggest hot wars up there with the Korean War they had. That goes all the way up to like the 1990s, when the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union collapsed and things like that. And I think I do kind of maybe talk about a few things after that happened following the end of the Cold War era. So those are all the different topics that are on that. Like I said, that's going to be assessed on that bonus quiz. And that will be due at the same time as the final exam on fascism in World War II. So usually, pretty much the same. And don't forget, there's no extensions, of course, on assessments at the end of the semester. It's pretty much how it is. So there is a discussion section on the Cold War era. If you got any questions by that time, I don't know, we'll have that many at the end, but if you have any, do let me know, comment or question throughout the semester. Now, let me move on. I've got some other things I'll kind of talk about in Canvas modules that we have. I pretty much put all the assignments in Canvas modules. They're also in assignments in other areas like announcements, but I do kind of different sections you need to look at in Canvas modules that are important. One is the vocabulary assignments. Those are assignments you need to turn in throughout the semester. You don't have to turn all of them in, but I do have some you will have to turn in, of course, overall. And there's 3 main ones that I've got. I'll kind of explain a little bit about them. I do a little thing different this semester about that. But for the different assignments, you have like a list of different historical terms. They could be like people, famous events, a battle, whatever it is. But you're supposed to define those terms. And you just pick 30. So just randomly pick 30. Don't go the first 30, whatever, just randomly do it. And 5 points each, of course, for each term. Make sure they're typed. It does say about type, things like that in it. But those students that turn in early, you get bonus points for it. You can see that right there. 10 bonus points, 10% bonus points But there is an option on it. I have a deal where for the first three vocabulary assignments, first, second, and third key terms, you only are obligated to turn in two of three. So you have to turn two of them in at least. So you decide which ones you're going to do, which first one, the second, or third. One of those, it doesn't matter. Going to turn the first two in, or second or third, whatever. But those out of the two of the three, you have to turn in. Okay, so if you turn all three of them in, I'm just going to drop one of them and just leave it blank. There'll just be a nothing there. So you only get credit for two of them. There's also one for there's a final one, like final key terms, like historical terms, and that's worth 40 bonus points. A lot of students do turn that one in too, by the way. It's worth extra credit. So you can do that as well. Make sure you list your sources, whether it's just like encyclopedias I've got listed, the assignment, your textbook, whatever. If you don't list sources, I may take points off, or you might not get the bonus, things like that overall. All right, moving down now, we do, of course, I have talked about probably in announcements, emails, videos already on my Canvas page, but we do have that research paper we have to do in the semester, the book report, and that is a mandatory assignment. So, for the semester, you need to try to read at least one historical work that I've got on my list of books, which is right here. So do read up about the book report. Mostly it's going to be like a summarization of the, pages that you were given to read in that book. And I think it's just like 50 pages minimum, whatever you want to read or can read, I guess. And I know for the summer, only 1 to 2 pages double spaced will be the minimum you have to turn in on whatever you read. Make sure you're not using AI and things. I'll be checking for AI and things like that later, of course. But the assignments here, you got the list of books that I've got right there as well. I do have a writing rubric as well that I've got. So do check out these links here. It's also listed in Canvas assignments too. There is the, of course, you can see there, the assignment will be due Friday, July 11th. So it is due early. That's one, I think that's a typo right there. I'll fix that later, but that's the due date, which is right there. So, yeah, go ahead and decide like what book you want to, read, and let me know about that. Of course, I probably have emails I'll be sending out about that, more or less. Yeah, we do have study guides, so do check those out too, as well. And I think they're worth bonus points if you turn them in. But a lot of the assessments, a lot of the questions come out of the study guide. I think I've got a deal where I'm probably put some of them in the actual, quiz assessments, either multiple choice or matching or whatever. But those are in there as well. So, do use those to work on the lectures and the assessments, and you can turn them in for extra credit. So they're worth 40 bonus points each. It's not really for each exam, but like the first exam study guide is for basically all the topics that are associated with the first exam, and also quizzes like during that period. Same thing with the second one, and same thing with the final one that I've got. So one on the bottom is going to be more like later stuff, that goes up to like the 20th century, more or less. So you look at those. Like I think might be a section in Canvas discussions. I might add that later or something if you got a question about the study guides, more or less. That's something it's not mandatory, but you can turn those in for extra credit or whatever you've completed, so far. Now, for another thing I've got here at the top, you can see here, I've got this voluntary bonus project that I've got that I've talked about before. BRCC Veterans Project. If you're interested in that, do let me know. That will be due at the end of the semester. That's when you'll, if you want to do this volunteer project where you interview a veteran Or if you're a veteran yourself, you can have someone interview you yourself. It depends on that if you are or not. That's it's a volunteer project. So this is something you don't have to do. You can substitute it for the book report, like if you wanted to, more or less, but it's worth 200 bonus points. I do have the guidelines for it, which is right here. So, make sure you look over it. The actual assignment, I think, has to be at least a 10-minute interview. So it's got to be at least 10 minutes, either audio interview or a video interview of a veteran. I do have examples of veterans interviews that have been done by BRCC students in the past with some of my classes. If you're interested in those, which are right there, kind of look at those, kind of give you an idea of how they did it or how not to do it. And that's the time period you're probably looking at. So probably the Cold War era up through like Afghanistan, Iraq War is pretty much probably the types of veterans you're going to run into. So they don't necessarily have to be in a war, by the way, but they might have. So I doubt you'll find any World War II veterans. Most of them are deceased, if you're wondering about that. So at the end of the semester, you can see Saturday, July 26th, when it's going to be due, and either attach it, put up, the video file into Canvas under the assignment, or you can also, email it to like Google Drive or whatever you're using for that. And I think there's a release form. Don't forget about that. That has to be signed by the veteran and filled out. That has to be turned in. I don't think I need a transcript or anything like that, but that's pretty much the project. So if you're interested in that, do let me know, of course, about it. On the bottom here, you'll see too, I've got the academic calendar that I've kind of put in here for the semester. And that kind of entails different like assignments that are due throughout the semester, different dates, holidays, and things like that. So I do have that posted in Canvas as well. And I do have on the bottom my office hours, which I won't be on campus. I'm a full-time professor, but most professors aren't on campus during the summertime. And so we're at home, and this is an asynchronous course. So pretty much email, Canvas discussions. Sometimes I use Zoom or something like that. I'm not really big into that. But I prefer email is usually my main contact. If you got a question about something, I'm pretty much answer pretty quick. Even on weekends, I'm pretty much, do that. So also got Canvas discussions also too. So, but I've got contact information, email, cell number right here. Office phone number really won't work, for the summer. But that's kind of giving you an idea of what Canvas looks like for the whole semester. So anyway, that's it for this particular video. It's kind of giving you a tour of Canvas, especially Canvas modules. Right now, y'all should be pretty much finish up on that pre-test contract policy page. That needs to be done in week 1 before we start, all these other assessments that you got to do out there. As of now, if you got a question about the course, do email me, or like I said, you have Canvas discussions, especially for comments, questions about lectures, and then also the YouTube. Don't forget you can, put the same comment question in YouTube. You'll get double bonus points, of course, for doing that. So that's it for this video. Hope everybody has a great summer semester at BRCC. Of course, see you off and on throughout the semester. Or you'll see my video, all my videos that I've got overall. So everybody take care.